Well, tonight, we needed, we wanted, at least 4 people to talk about this movie, mostly because there's a lot to talk about. We're talking about the best foreign language film that won at the Golden Globes. We're going to talk about Roma tonight. It's directed by Alfonso Cuaron. You might know him, and let me make sure real quick, but I believe he directed the third Harry Potter movie, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he did. Hold on. Let me make sure.
Yeah,
There you go. Prisoner of Azkaban. I want to make sure. He directed Gravity, which is a great technical film. Like, if you want to see some really good technical work when it comes to movies, whether it be special effects or actual machinery being used in film, practical effects, Gravity is a great film to use that. He directed one of my favorite films, Children of Men, which has one of my favorite one-shot action sequences of all time.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Have any of you guys seen any of his movies?
I've seen Gravity.
I've seen Gravity, Birdman.
He did not direct Birdman.
Nope,
that was Alejandro.
That's Alejandro. You're right. Oh God, I'm so stupid. I have seen Gravity and Children of Men though, and both were great.
And Harry Potter.
I
haven't seen Harry Potter. No, I wouldn't have attributed that to him anyways. And I saw Roma.
That's it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at his list of movies, a lot of them are mid 2000s on, and he's got maybe 5 or 6, I think it was, true American films. This was, I believe, like a Mexican-American film, Roma was, right?
It was
joint venture.
Yeah, foreign language. He hasn't really directed anything really big. He had a large break. Yeah, Children of Men was in 2006. He didn't direct anything that came out, I think, in American cinemas that was as big as that until Gravity, which came out in 2013. And then, this is kind of his biggest thing since then because, it's Netflix, and Netflix is you can watch it anywhere. Even though it is a foreign language film, you can still watch it anywhere. But yeah, we're going to be reviewing that tonight. We're also going to be talking about the Golden Globes. We're going to talk about some of our reactions to some of the winners that won that night. I was shocked about one of them. We're also going to be talking about, I've been meaning to talk about this, but, due to the basketball games that have been happening, we didn't get a chance to. But I want to talk about Holmes and Watson. And speaking about Netflix, I want to talk about what Netflix did to that movie, which I thought was hilarious. But in the meantime, we're going to start off with Roma. Do any of you guys want to give a plot synopsis?
I don't.
Anybody? Jack, you want to go for it?
I can try. I think I did an okay job last time.
You did a great
job.
job.
You did
a really
so keep
good
going until you fail?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this movie is set in 1970s Mexico City, and it essentially focuses on one main character who is a maid for a family living in Mexico City. There are 4 kids, 2 parents, and then there's another maid in the house as well.
And a cute dog.
And a dog, yes. And it follows her tale within the scope of what's happening in Mexico in the 1970s and her relationships outside of the house, as well as the changes in family structure as the movie goes on. And you do get insight into the other characters. You get a little bit of the kids' lives and what's going on with the parents. But it really is just a 2-year span of this protagonist's story. So pretty simple setup, but the events are really what make the story, and it's tough to lay out all the events in a synopsis because I feel like we're going to break those down in a little bit.
Yeah, that's basically what this movie is. What the way I saw it as, because Matthew and I actually watched this together. We watched this in our in the classroom here at the college.
Yes.
And while we were watching it, the entire time sitting there, I'm like, I didn't even know what the movie was about. Actually, I never saw a trailer for this. I just knew who directed it, and then I saw it won Best Foreign Language Film. I'm like, okay, Netflix made something good. We better check this out. And as I was watching it, I just didn't know what it was about until about halfway through. I kind of just realized I'm like, okay, this is kind of like a coming of age story, except with actually not like a teenager like most of those films are. This is about a maid, and you could maybe tie it more to motherhood, womanhood as well. There are some connections there.
Yeah, definitely.
But you are following basically a whole year of this maid that lives in the city of Roma in Mexico.
Yeah. And
just what happens to her in this one year. And some of you might be like, well, that doesn't sound that interesting, and some of you might be like, wow, that actually sounds like something I want to see because it's way different than most of the stuff I see in theaters, which is explosions and everything. And all I gotta say is, if you don't think this can be interesting, well, the movie kind of proves you wrong.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion. I thought for a movie that you focus on a maid living with a family during the 1970s, oh my God, this woman goes through one hell of a journey.
I would say that you will know whether or not this movie is for you within the opening minutes, because the film starts off right away with, as director Cuaron. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Alfonso Cuaron.
Cuaron is as he's known for, very big like one like take shot right at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah,
kind of showing you like the daily routine of this maid, and it's all very slow, but it's very beautiful. But it is slow, and but I think a lot of the slow pacing, like with a lot of films like this, a lot of art house films, it's necessary because it gets you comfortable, it gets you attached to routine that is sort of monotonous, maybe a bit boring, and then it mixes things up.
Well, the one thing I liked about that opening was just like how quiet and just calming and soothing it was. It was like watching an ASMR video.
Yeah, it really was. It was definitely soothing. And the thing about this, every Netflix movie that I feel like people talk about, like, oh, Netflix released this other movie that people talk about, there's always a caveat. Like Bird Box is okay. And all those movies are always like, oh, it's cool, but it's okay. It's missing something. Like, it's missing some substance.
Like, there's plenty of movies that we like, Cloverfield Paradox is another one. Like, people are just like, yeah, it's all right. I mean, some people think it's the worst movie this year. I don't know about that.
I thought it was pretty bad, but I wouldn't call it the worst.
Yeah, and then you have the Adam Sandler movies with Jack. You even like think those are like pretty good.
Yeah, I enjoy a lot of them.
And there hasn't been really anything I think this level on Netflix yet.
Yeah,
like they actually went like very art house film with it.
Very much so. Yeah, it's very minimalist in a lot of ways, but it's so human in the story it's telling. Like, it's very emotional and it's beautiful, and every scene that when I was watching the movie, I was like, God, this can be like this could be a title card right there. Like, that's how beautiful the scene was. Like, it was all so gorgeous.
There were a lot of like wide frame like images, like a lot of very grand like establishing like scenes where I think halfway through the film I turned to Joe and I said, this film is like looking through an old picture book. And I should mention, this movie is entirely black and white. I don't know if any of us mentioned that yet.
We didn't.
No, but I did notice.
This movie is entirely black and white. And at first I was wondering, like, how is that really going to come into play? Like, how is it just like a stylistic choice, or is there some meaning behind it? And I think the meaning behind it is just that it really sells that feel that you're watching and like an old piece of cinema. And I think, this film is like looking through a bunch of old, very nostalgic photographs.
I agree with that. And the thing also that you mentioned is it was grand. And that's the thing. Like, this movie is very minimalist and bare bones. It's even black and white. But it's also super, like, grand. Like, how Gravity is, like those long, grueling takes, or Children of Men, the famous long, grueling take that you were talking about in the beginning. That's what this movie is, too. But it's also, like, very minimal, too. And, like, it's this weird juxtaposition that I can't really describe, but it's just really cool, and that's a really cool way of putting it, looking through old photos.
Jack, you've been kind of quiet. You want to add on to this?
Well, I'm kind of letting this develop because I don't necessarily have a different take, but more one to expand on. And in the theme of juxtaposition, as you said earlier, Matt, that you can kind of tell from the first few minutes if you're going to like it or not. I got a few minutes into it, and I was like, oh, boy, it's going to be one of these movies. But I think it drastically changes as the movie goes on.
Yeah.
Even though the tone and the feel of the movie aren't any different, the story is more compelling. The pace of the movie feels quicker, and a lot of that, I think, is tied to the emotions that you're forced to feel that you don't at the beginning because it's kind of a routine household. Everything's very expected. And as different events unfold, I think I second-guessed. I'm like, I really had to give it time because you could watch the first 20 minutes of the movie and feel nothing. And that's probably what's supposed to happen. You don't necessarily stake yourself with any character or anything or any plot point. So I'm curious to see, as I just watched this earlier today, within the last few hours. So it's super fresh in my mind. I'm still kind of digesting it all. But I don't typically watch movies like this either. And that's where I'm like, am I selling it short or am I selling it too high maybe? And I'm curious to hear ideas as we progress.
It's the one thing that sucks about, I mean, it kind of sucks about reviewing movies like this is that we typically don't get to see many movies like this most of the time because... anytime a movie like this does come out in the theaters, you got to see it right away or it's gone.
Yeah.
There are very few times, unless if it gets nominated for an Oscar, it stays in theaters for a long time. Usually when it gets nominated for an Oscar, it'll come back and have like an Oscar rerun. It'll be like, oh, well, here's our best, you can rewatch the best pictures at AMC every year when they get nominated at the Oscars. But with this, you got Netflix. So like you can watch this anytime, anywhere, which helps a lot. And I think that's actually also kind of a benefit of the movie too, because let's just say like first 20 minutes you're just not into it and everything. I mean, like you could just pause it and just come back later. You could like just do what you want. You're watching it at home. And I was like Jack. I'm not gonna lie. When me and Matthew were sitting in that classroom, the first like 20-25 minutes, I'm like, man, I love this guy's movies, but like this one's not just gonna do it for me, man. It's not until like you kind of see this woman's daily routine. You see the struggle that she goes through like every day with this family, and also not to like was it Cleo was the main character?
Yeah. Sorry, making noise with the chair.
Oh, you're good. Like not to like degrade her or anything, but she ain't the best maid.
Yeah.
Like she's okay. Like
but you see dog poop everywhere.
Yeah,
like in the garage for like instance.
Like constantly the family's stepping in dog poo, and then like there's always like kids are fighting with one another, and she's like a minute too late to like break up the fight, or like a second too late to break up the fight. And it's like you see her kind of slowly go through like just I guess she's like, this is why I think it's kind of like a coming of age thing, because you're kind of watching her change throughout this movie to where at the end of the movie she is someone different. She goes through the typical hero's journey of like you start at one point, then you come back to where you started, but you're a whole new person. And that's kind of why I compared it to that. Because you are just, like we've been saying, you're just watching her like just kind of go through this whole year of like one hell of a ride in her life. And I mean, it is a hell of a ride. You were saying something earlier, and I meant to like elaborate on it, and I kind of forgot now.
What was I saying earlier?
Juxtaposition.
Juxtaposition. Well, that was one. I think you said that first, and then I said it.
You climbed on top of that one.
Oh, pacing. Pacing. That was another thing too. Every single time I talked to somebody about this movie, everybody told me like, oh man, I don't know how you're gonna sit there and watch the movie though, because like one big thing I really strike movies for is pacing. It's like if you start slowing down, it's like I can feel it right away. I don't know why. Maybe it's because like the editing classes I've taken, I can kind of tell when a film is starting to slow down. And like after just watching so many movies for so much time, it's like I can kind of tell like we're hitting a low point in the film right here. It's starting to slow down. And every person I talked to before I watched this movie told me, yeah, I don't think you're gonna like it that much because of the pacing. And for some reason, this was the complete opposite of that. In the first 20 minutes, I felt like it was going to be like that. But once like things get rolling, and you got like what she does every day, and a big plot point is revealed, the movie just like it just captured me the entire time. I was just into it the entire time, wanting to see how is this going to end? How is she going to like by the end of this year, who is she going to become by the end of this?
Yeah, that's actually really fun. I'm glad you guys have mentioned that, because the first 20 minutes for me was like, oh God, I don't know. I don't know if I could sit through this as well.
Yeah.
And then I literally did what you said. I paused it and I came back to it later, and I was like, okay, now I'm really hooked. Because and even before then, I was like, I still don't know.
Because let me tell you, man, there's been plenty of times I've seen movies like this in theaters, and it's like first 5 minutes go by, I'm like, I'm not with it. I need to get up. I need to stretch. I need to get something to eat, drink. But it's like, I don't want to get up because I'm going to miss something.
Yeah. And it actually might have been longer, because this movie is like 2 hours and 40 minutes or something like that. So it might have been even further than that half hour that we keep saying. I fortunately, looking back, I think I paused at the perfect point when I took about an hour and a half break watching it and came back. And I think it was like the pivot of the movie when it changes from the first part, which we're saying was kind of slow, kind of boring, more expected, into the second part where it feels, I don't want to say more movie, because both are obviously movies, but more like the movies I see would be an appropriate way of putting that. And I paused right around the scene where she's seeing a movie at the movie theater.
Yeah.
And that's basically the point where it turns.
Point, yeah.
That's the moment where the movie, I think, really begins, where the, well, not necessarily
the conflict, I guess.
Yeah, the conflict of the,
which
because
I guess we can say it. Like, we won't give away how it ends, but we can say what it is.
Yeah, so Cleo discovers that she is pregnant, and that's kind of the big dramatic hook of the story, is kind of seeing how she's going to deal with that, how it's going to conflict with her, with her job and her life, and her love life, and her life as she knows it with this family,
and just living in the city that she lives in.
Yeah.
Because like I mean, while like this is in the 1970s, there's like this whole riot that's going on in Mexico City and like involving student protests, the government getting involved, and then this guerrilla army, which plays into the movie later during one intense scene.
And you don't get enough context as to what's going on in the area because we know it's Mexico City. And it's like Colonia Roma, I think, is the neighborhood. Yeah. But even within the neighborhood, it would appear from the beginning that the family that employs Cleo is of a higher like socioeconomic status. Yeah. But when they zoom out, there's no proof of that. And everything that they go about in their lives also seems very typical. Yeah. But you never get that impression, which kind of isolates the family, the maids included, from the rest of society. So when there are scenes that are family related, you watch that with one mentality. And then when there are scenes where it's Cleo and Adela was the name of the other maid, or whether she's out with Fermin was her boyfriend, whatever the situation is, as she's out and about, you get a completely different perspective or feel of the movie.
Yeah. Can I just say too, and not to give away too much about the movie, but Fermin is going down as one of the worst villains. Oh, yeah. Not like worst as in bad character development, but like actually a villain I hate. Yeah. Like an antagonist.
Right up there with the girl who, with the woman who ripped the baseball card in Christmas Chronicles.
Oh no.
like you know, like this year we had Thanos, we had Killmonger, and then now we have Fermin. Like oh man, this dude got under my skin.
And he had like 5 minutes of screen time. He was hardly in it, and you hate him so much.
He has one scene you're like, oh, he really cares about her. And then there's another scene, it's like, okay. And then like one other scene where like she kind of confronts him. Yeah. And I won't spoil what the last scene that you see him in, but it just made me go, you know what, man? You don't need this man in your life. You're better than this.
That's true. It's nice to see that there's no dredging on of, oh, but I still want to be with Fermin. Like she gets over it quick because she's very obligated to her work and to the children she works with.
In a very unfortunate way.
Yeah, and that is one thing that, again, subtle part of the movie, but there are very few, I would say, notable archetypes or stereotypes of the female protagonist that reveal themselves because there's a relationship that takes the back burner to everything else that's going on, and there's the boyfriend who takes a back burner to everything else, and she moves on quick, which was nice because there definitely was the potential for them to sit on that topic for too long in a scene or in the movie in whole.
Yeah, this is a film where the character-driven narrative, it is set against a backdrop of of a conflict that is clearly historically based, but they don't really give you information. Because they don't really need to explain to you what's going on because it's not about what's happening historically. It's about like how it's about how these terrible events, which could happen anywhere at any time, affect just people. And I just want to say, there's a school of thought when it comes to cinematography that like every shot should have a purpose. This is a film where, despite those slow moments at the beginning, this film really, everything has a purpose. I think this has some of the most haunting and most beautiful foreshadowing I have ever seen in a film. Because and it's like I've talked earlier about how this film gets you comfortable. There are sequences of showing families together, and it just makes you feel
earthquake.
It just makes you feel very comfortable and at home. And these are very happy scenes, but then something bad will happen, and it could be so brief, it could be so large, but everything about it. And it's not just to say like something like, oh, bad things happen all the time. It's specifically symbolic of later events that are to come, both for the characters and for the world at large. At the very end of the film, and again, I'm not spoiling anything here, but there is dialogue stated by a character, and as soon as the character began to speak, I became terrified. I was like, no, stop saying that. No, I know exactly what this means. Oh God, I love the way this film kind of teaches you to expect terrible things because it pays off so well at the conclusion.
Yeah, and that's a big thing about foreshadowing too. Like we talked about how she develops into this like heroine kind of thing, like this hero. And one thing is we get glimpses of her selflessness like throughout the movie. Like when she talks to her who she works for, the mom, and she's like, I'm she tells her that she's pregnant, and the first thing she says is, "Are you going to fire me?" And that's like that just goes to show you how actually selfish she is as a person. And I thought that was some good foreshadowing.
And to go off of the every shot counts, not even within the movie, is I remember seeing one poster for Roma, and here we go, this is going to be great podcast, great radio. But for the people that are sitting by me, if you look at the 2 posters that were released by Roma, they are 2 very important scenes that you don't know until after the movie how important they are. And how many movies do we have that released a poster that's just like a picture of the character standing there? Yeah. And these are iconic moments from the movie that once you see it, you won't forget. So even before you watch, you still get that feel just by looking at a poster.
The one that when you go on Netflix and you sign in and you see it and it's the family surrounding Cleo. I mean, like, when you see that image at the end of the film too, it hits you hard. Like, I remember I heard Matthew like sniffling. I don't know if you heard me going, like, you know, trying to hold back. I'm like, oh man, I really don't want to with this movie. I really don't want to, but it's hitting there, man. It's getting there. Speaking of cinematography, man. This is going to win Best Cinematography. Can we agree on that?
Easily.
It should.
It definitely should if it doesn't.
Like, not even just the foreshadowing parts, but I mean, there are so many shots. It's just beautiful to look at. Like, the shot where, like, she's trying to catch up with the family as they're going to, like, a theater, and, like, everybody stops on the sidewalk, and then, like, on the left side of the screen is, like, this nightlife. You have, like, lights going off, cars passing by, and then people begin to cross the street, and it's just all done in one take, and it's just fascinating to watch. There's also so many shots like where she's walking towards like a large crowd of people, and there's so much to look at. There's like merchants on the street. There's a plane flying by. I mean, it just so much eye candy in one shot. And with it being in black and white, I think it kind of helps because if this was in color, could you imagine how many colors would be on screen to distract you?
Yeah, that's another thing. Mexico is a beautiful place, especially Mexico City. There's vibrancy in the colors, like contrasted with like the landscape and like the mountainous ranges and all that kind of stuff. And maybe that's a choice that he chose, this black and white, to kind of like give you like a sense of dread, but also like the sense of like how impactful it is to tell this story about just these people.
Yeah. No, and then, of course, also, and then we'll take a short break right after this. Smoking always looks cool in black and white.
Yeah, it definitely does.
It's always such, like, I mean, with noir films and any film that's in black and white, smoking always looks cool.
The acting was just so good. Like, it was so good. And, like, he picked up this young 25-year-old who just looks like the normal person. I've been to Mexico. I have family in Mexico. And it just looks like the normal person you'd see in Mexico. Like, just a normal person. And she acted her butt off in this movie.
You're talking about Cleo?
Yeah, Cleo. Yeah, I'm sorry. And
I'm going to try pronouncing her name. You want to give it a shot, actually? You might be able.
What is it? I can't even see from here.
Oh, sorry. Hold on. Come on. There you go.
Oh, okay. Yalitza Aparicio.
Hey, there we go. I think that sounds accurate.
Nice.
I think that's it. And she went... We were talking about the scene where she like is discussing her pregnancy with the mom. Yeah. And that scene alone was like a tearjerker for me. It was so powerful, like how she was talking about it, and she was like speechless almost. Mm-hmm. And the mom was like, "What is it? What's going on?" Like, and she was like comforting her. And I don't know, I just felt really connected in that moment to that character. And I was like, "Wow, I'm feeling so much emotion right now."
Man, let me say, I mean, like, you know, she's pregnant, so you know eventually she's going to give birth eventually in the movie. Right. When her water breaks, man, I was like sweating. I was like, I've seen some of the most intense action movies this year. You have Mission Impossible Fallout, Avengers, like all these movies with great action scenes, characters like that are going to die that I love, or Tom Cruise nearly killing himself with every stunt. Somehow, a woman breaking her water was one of the most intense things I've seen in a while.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, I was more just shocked by everything else that happened in that scene leading up to it. The
brutality
of it, especially.
Well, and you guys know what movies she was in before this, right?
No.
None.
No, not at all.
This was her first movie. Yeah. Oh, she has no formal acting training and was, I guess you would say, educated as a preschool educator. And this is kind of also, like, it isn't her life story, but I'm looking and it says that she was raised by a single mother who worked as a maid. So there's some of that there, but it's just crazy to think, like, where have I seen her before?
Her mother.
Yeah, you just haven't seen
this
her.
Role.
This is, it was an amazing performance, especially considering she hasn't done anything before this, which I did not know until after the movie when I took a look.
I always love when films like this are kind of, especially films that are as big as this in terms of, like, their publicity, when they give an opportunity for new talent to really shine.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it with Star Wars? That was Mark Hamill's start.
Yeah.
And look what it did for him. I mean, like, one of the best trilogies of all time.
Now with the new generation of Star Wars
that's true too, Like you have Daisy Ridley. I mean, that was basically her start, and now she's in like Murder on the Orient Express. She's got a movie with Tom Holland coming out soon.
Yeah, I'm hoping this like carries her further and not like a Captain Phillips like thing.
Oh yeah, where that one guy, I am the captain now. I forgot his name because I mean, look, he hasn't been in anything.
Yeah, exactly.
The last time I saw that dude was Blade Runner 2049. He was like in a scene for 15 seconds. He turns to Ryan Gosling and goes, "You go here," and that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Which, by the way, I heard that line was improvised. I don't know if that's true or not.
But I mean, not even her too. The family themselves, they were. I mean, like. So you're kind of seeing, what I like about this movie too is you see the family drama from her point of view. You're really kept on the outside for a very long time. It's not until there's this whole thing going on between the husband and wife of the family that she takes care of. The husband goes away to Quebec for a few days, but there's something really going on between them, and you're slowly trying to piece it together yourselves. Me and Anthony. My God, doesn't even know Anthony here. Me and Matthew.
Yeah, it's just me, Anthony. Anthony Lundeen.
Me and Matthew, like, I had him pause it for a little bit because I wanted to share theories halfway through the movie. I was like, dude, where is his dad? Where is the husband?
Yeah.
Like, you know, we started sharing theories and everything. And I love that you kind of, like, you were just basically stuck in her point of view. We just got a text message. They're asking what movie we're talking about. Sorry about that. Forgot to mention that. We're talking about Roma, the Netflix film. It won Best Foreign Language Film at the Golden Globes. And after seeing that, we decided to watch it very last minute and review it here on Variety Viso. Thank you for tuning in, by the way. Thank you for the text. Sorry we didn't get that at the beginning when we came back on. But yeah, I mean, like, it was so, like, interesting to see, like, okay, what is happening with this family? And it's great that you are kept basically from her point of view.
Yeah, and it felt so real. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah.
It just, they all felt like they were actually like all...
Yeah, it felt like you were actually watching a family. All the siblings interacted very well with one another. You bought it.
Super underrated is the fact that these kids actually acted well.
Yeah.
The acting of kids, children, teens, however you want to put it,
it's hit or miss.
It can kill a movie. It can really make you not believe the movie. And
like,
not that kids can't act, but these guys did just enough.
As I learned recently when I saw Aquaman.
Oh my God.
But when you're saying it wasn't even the problem with the kid actor, it was the teenage actor, which, oh man.
Well, no,
it's still a concern.
Even like another DC movie, even with Aquaman, actually, real quick, the bullies that pick on him at the aquarium.
Yeah.
And they're like, look at this. Arthur's talking to the fish. Like, what a weirdo. It's like, one, bad dialogue doesn't help this, but this is also very bad, like, you know, acting. But even with Wonder Woman, the little girl that plays Diana at the very beginning of the film.
You didn't like her?
No, I didn't like.
I thought she was cute.
She's cute, but the entire time it
takes you out of the movie.
It takes you out of the movie because it's like it's trying to focus on how cute she is.
Yeah.
And also like when the mother was reading her the story in Wonder Woman about Hades or whatever the hell she fights at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
Kinda. She does kind of fight hell, right?
I mean, I guess. She had to fight every other DC movie leading up to that point.
And she won.
And she won. And like the entire time, like I love how like the mother's reading her the book and like she's smiling when it's all happy, but then when it talks about Hades, she's like, oh. And once again, not the best acting, but also probably not the best directing for a kid, not the best material to work with. Because even like the dialogue that I forgot the actor for Wonder Woman's mom is, but like even her dialogue during that scene was bad. It's just like. But with kid actors, most of the time they are bad. And sometimes you get like adult actors that get bad material, but they can make it work still. Yeah. Kid actors, it's probably not going to work most of the time. Every once in a while, you'll get like kids on Stranger Things level that are that good.
Yeah. And part of it was just how the shots were constructed, that the kids, whether the scene was about them or not, were never the primary subject of the panel you're looking at. Like there was never a zoom in on a kid's face or anything. So they didn't have to be over the top in presentation. The only one, the oldest kid, Tonyo was his name. That was the one where he would get angry at the younger one sometime. And I'm like, okay, this is, it was very like sitcom-y, how he's like, Mom, the kids are annoying me. And so outside of that, like they all did well enough because there wasn't too high of an expectation. But it's one of those, I wouldn't praise the movie for having good kid actors. I would praise it for not picking actors that take away from how good the rest of the movie was.
Like even Pepe, the little boy that was basically like the cute kid amongst the family. I mean, like he was used sparingly, and when he was used, it was used effectively for emotion. Especially the scene he interacts with Cleo, like the rooftop scene at the beginning of the movie. When you look back at that scene now, I mean, there's so much more emotion to it.
And that's a movie poster scene right
That's
there
a movie
too,
poster
where you
scene,
look
yeah.
and
You were just showing us that
you were
one.
thinking about it at the end of the movie. I realized, I'm like, oh man, I forgot how that movie started. Because when you take a break and it's slower at the beginning, you get caught up in what's going on. That would be, I would say, one shortcoming of the movie is there was so much intricate setup and flash forwarding, sort of. You know what's about to happen when you rewatch it, but your first time through, or at least my first time through, there's a lot of the details from the beginning of the movie that were more important or cooler than they seemed, and then they were lost on me because it takes a while to really hook you in if this isn't your style of movie.
Yeah.
And that part of that is just me as a viewer, different than whoever's picking this for the Oscars. Typically, if I hear Oscar nominated, I'm not watching it. But this was a good one.
Yeah.
I just want to say the mom of the family in this in Roma is just.
She was really good.
She was so good, and for some reason, I always get like really super emotionally attached to like mother characters and stories, just because it's like.
Especially what she's going through.
Yeah, because she's going through a
even
lot.
though she's got the maid, she has Cleo that'll help raise the family. You could tell, like, even being on her own still is taking a toll on her.
Yeah, and just because at the beginning of the film, it's like when you're trying to get a handle on like what Cleo's like relation to the family is and like how well they get along. And I was just so like worried. He's like, oh, I hope they don't treat her poorly. Oh, I hope they aren't like mean or anything.
That's what I thought too.
And that's the thing, because I was thinking that might be the main crux of the story, and then it turned into something. And I was so happy to know that like the mom was like a cool character. And yeah, what's that actress's name? I want to know.
Her name is Alex. Once again, dude, I'm gonna need your help.
All right, that's Marina de Tavira, I think.
There you go. And she's
fantastic actress.
She's got credit in 31 Things. She's mostly in some TV shows. I'm guessing Telemundos, maybe.
Probably.
Because like most of these like television series that I'm looking at are in Spanish.
Okay.
So I'm gonna guess it's Telemundos or just any like.
Probably.
Like Spanish television. But yeah, she was very good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was really good, and like you said, it was a nice thing that they took away from that cliche that everyone was expecting, where that she was the mistreated maid thing.
Yeah,
and you there's glimpses.
That was also something that took me out of the film. Yeah, was like, oh, we're gonna do this, like the mistreated maid. Really, we're gonna go with this, like. I was like,
I totally thought that too within the first like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And she's not. She's just going through such a hard time.
And she just takes out anybody.
Yeah, and it's fine. And like you understand why she's doing it, and you're and even Cleo kind of understands it too. Like they're both going through something, and it's understandable on both accounts.
Jack?
Oh boy, everybody's looking at me. I'm reading up on I'm just trying to read up because one thing that struck me as notable, though I didn't know why, was the history about it. And I'm looking, this is based one of the main scenes, or I guess it all leads up to the Corpus Christi massacre.
And that's with the student protest.
Yeah, and that is something that generally I'm familiar with, the Mexican dirty war that went on. I didn't know about this particular incident.
Yeah.
And there are bits and pieces of the background that I noticed, like, okay, that's important, but I don't know why. So, like, the actual Mexican president at the time was Luis Echeverria Alvarez. That's something that you see. I think it's on a wall, like plastered on a wall in the background as they're walking the streets. And it's nice for me. I don't know if everything was perfectly historically accurate, but you are grounded in a time period. Yeah. Because especially with black and white, you're like, okay, it's the past. What does that mean? Well, we see that at 1970, 1971, and you then get to kind of place yourself in, whether you know about what was going on in Mexico at the time, you can probably think of something comparable. It's some sort of oppression versus rebellion, some sort of almost civil war, and you get hints of that as part of the plot, but you don't know that those are real things. Yeah. And now I can read up on it and identify, okay, these are real things, and they also don't lean on it too much. They use it enough to put you somewhere, but they don't use it too much where all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is all going to take place and some dramatic thing with this war. But it was almost a background to her story rather than her being a part of it.
Yeah, I like that. It was just a backdrop. I also like that they went to go see Marooned by the guy that did Gravity. And I thought that was just a cool nod.
A cool little touch.
Yeah, so that was pretty neat.
And it flows beautifully into the next scene where you see a kid with like a helmet on playing Spaceman.
Yeah.
So it's so... Because when that first happened, I was like, what the heck does this have to do with anything? And then it flows into the next scene and you're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah. Definitely one of my favorite movies I've seen, honestly. And I'm excited to see what comes of it, like in regards to the Oscars, because I hope it gets recognized for a lot of things, especially cinematography, like we were talking about.
Especially cinematography. And then Matthew, you wanted to talk about music in this movie.
Yeah, so because it reminded me, the mixture of the slow pacing in the beginning and the sound design in this film. It reminded me a lot of another film I saw not too long ago. It was an animated film called Liz and the Blue Bird, which you can read my review of it at sakurasunriseblog.wordpress.com. But it was the fact that it's just the most... It's very simple sound design, but it speaks volumes to the emotions of the characters. There's a scene where someone is driving away, and as they're driving away, there is a marching band getting closer and closer to the point where the noise is just, it's very intense. It's almost annoying in a way, and that is just kind of indicative of like the just the noise going on in those characters' heads.
Yeah,
and
that's another thing too. Yeah, sound did play a big part of this as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a small point, but it's a one moment that I just had to write down in my notes, because I thought that, so much in these art films are about symbolism and just yeah. You saw
one of them is the cool dog.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I have one about cool dogs. I have one about like the one scene of just like very extensive male nudity. But this I really don't have too much to say about it. It's just the sound design was very good.
And you know what? Another good thing too is that while this is a art house movie, it doesn't lose focus on its story. There are so many times I've seen Tree of Life is one. I had to look it up real quick to make sure that was the name of it. But The Tree of Life, directed by Terrence Malick, is a movie to me that becomes way too art house. Like it loses track of the story, gets way too involved in what does this mean, open interpretation.
So it's like very
and then like by the end of the movie, like a whole new plot point opens up and it ends with that, and you're just like, wait, what? That no, that didn't happen. What are you guys talking about? Like, I'm glad Roma didn't do that. Roma was like, we can balance both perfectly. You can watch this as a drama as well as look at it as an art house film.
Yeah, like there's obviously symbolism throughout. There's foreshadowing, and it is very art house in that regard. Otherwise, it's super grounded.
Or avant-garde.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's super grounded and very it's just telling a story about this one woman and the family she works for.
And I think the story, it does move well. One of my issues, and for somebody else this could be a plus to the movie, was when it ends, you've hit a point with the characters and their relationships with each other where at least I felt that, well, where do they go from here? Because it leaves open-ended and you feel good after moments of feeling better or worse throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. But I felt unsettled because I'm like, there's no proof, there's no evidence to suggest that like things are good now. And some of that is maybe intended, like to kind of give you that, all right, well, bad things are still happening. But it just seems like for a movie that took so much time to get there, it never even ended.
I'll agree to that, actually. I feel like the film, if there's one criticism I do have, it kind of just abruptly ends.
Yeah.
Like, I thought we'll give, like, just one last wrap up with everybody, but it's like, they kind of just... She literally just goes on a roof to do laundry, and the movie just ends. I'm like, oh, okay, we're just going to end there.
Yeah. I didn't even realize that was the ending scene until the credits rolled. Because I'm watching, and I'm like, all right. And then all of a sudden it starts, I'm like... wait, this is how it ends? And I didn't feel slighted or wronged by that, because that is something that kind of puts you in the shoes of, all right, well, the character has triumphed over these events. Yeah. That's good. But that was one of my main critiques, would be that it ends and you don't really have any solace in what has happened to everybody.
I was told Matthew when we got done watching, I was like, hey, can you fast forward? I want to see if it says Cleo will return in Avengers Endgame or something. I just need some type of conclusion basically to her character.
Yeah, well, because this movie, and I can totally understand where Jack is coming from, because I don't think this is a film with a very traditional type of story. It's not like there is an objective that they're like looking towards. It's very much just kind of like you're seeing the hardships of this woman's life, and the film is really you kind of watching her journey, and then only at the very end is the moment where she has to kind of prove what she's learned. It's a series of unfortunate events capped off with her kind of a moment in which she sort of is like, no, I'm not going to let this happen. And that's what I would say is really beautiful about this film, is that it's kind of saying, it's like, sometimes, like a lot of times, horrible things are going to happen. It comes at you in waves, and it's about fighting the wave, and that's how that's part of life.
So here's what I'll contrast that is, if I can liken this to, and this is just the first movie that comes to mind, if I think of a movie very focused on characters and events, though the background is revolution, I think of Les Mis.
Yeah.
There are definitely parallels to be made as far as what you just said with both movies. However, at the end of that movie, I leave with a resolve that even though, again, revolution was not the primary focus of that movie, nor is it of Roma, but you know what's going on in the background while it happens. And at the end, there is here's how it ended. Whether you feel good or whether you feel bad about it, there are at least hints or clues in the background or in the context of what's going on that put you in a place of peace where you're like, okay, at least I know this is what happened. Whereas with this, like, I don't know about the characters that we focused on. I don't know about the supporting characters, and I don't know about the background conflict. And when you put so much emotional stake into all of that, if any of it could have been tied up, I would have felt better about it. And that's one where it could have been something loose. I'll pick up a cheesy example, would be if there's a newspaper headline that says the war is over. That's like a very staple TV. I don't want that in this movie because it's super cliched and basic. Yeah. But even something that isn't your direct focus, that gives you an indication that, like, things are good, because one of the closing shots features an airplane in the sky. In fact, I believe it's the closing shot.
Yeah.
And that is the same angle and part of the screen where an airplane flew over at the beginning. Great. That's symmetric symbolism in film, but that airplane didn't really mean anything to me. And if it had, maybe that would have been an example of something where you can just put a bow on part of it. I felt like everything was open-ended at the end, and the triumph happened maybe 20 minutes before the movie ended. So now you have that gap of, okay, well, you gave me all this extra stuff at the end. Now what?
Okay. I totally see where you're coming from, but I would probably disagree with you. I actually really liked the ending.
And that's what I said, is some people might love that.
Yeah.
It didn't work for me.
Yeah, and I totally get where you're coming from, but for me, I thought that was like the perfect like bookend. It ends where it began, and it's because it's a grounded story. These characters still have their lives to live. That's why the plane is still flying above them. There's still a world out there for them. There's still a world in that universe. And it's almost triumphant because she goes back to where she is in the beginning. This selfless maid that works for this family goes back to being that same maid and kind of moving and triumphing throughout the like middle of the movie and all the chaos that happens. And she's like, she brushes it off and goes back to just doing her laundry. And I thought that was like really powerful, especially for like a very feminist like standpoint. Like, it's just like these women have gone through so much and they are still strong-willed.
And from a technical perspective, it shows progression in the fact that, the first shot where you saw that plane going overhead, it was through a reflection in water that was cascading across the ground, whereas the final shot is a shot towards the sky, looking up.
Yeah, not using water for the reflection.
Yeah, not using water for the reflection, and showing our main character like ascending the building.
And then the mom of the family, the mother of the family, it was another thing that, and I don't know if we're ready to move. I don't know how many criticisms the three of you have, but this was another one that, to me, yes, you see that these are strong women who overcome horrible things, terrible things that happen to them. But at least where we leave off, I definitely didn't feel stable with the mother, because as Cleo is going through her own personal matters, she's still obligated to her job and taking care of a family that is now not what it was at the beginning. And the mother then materially changes. You see different moments of different elements of a different person.
Yeah.
And through all of that, by the end, you get the nice family scene at the end and everybody's together, but there are definitely major hints of instability, and that maybe it's juxtaposition or maybe it just didn't blend well for me with Cleo is seemingly in a good place and has come to terms with what has happened and has moved on. Whereas the mother, though it may appear so on the surface, I don't know what events led to that. It's a very snap decision. If she's like over it, there was no proud moment of, hey, my character's good now, like we had with Cleo on multiple times.
That's what sucks about talking to the mother character, especially because the moment where you have that snap is kind of a spoiler. But I do see where you're coming from that as well. It didn't bother me as much, mostly because we were focusing on Cleo the whole time, and like she was just, the mother was kind of more of a secondary character. But I totally see your criticism there.
And she represents, at least through the early components of the movie, she represents the maternal figure in Cleo's life, where she's not necessarily with her family. I don't recall, did they say she was from Oaxaca maybe in the movie?
She's from Oaxaca, the actress. I think she is in this movie because Oaxaca, they speak kind of a different language and they weren't speaking Spanish a lot of the time.
It's the Mixtec, I think, is what they were saying the language was. Whatever it may have been, it's now the mother plays an more important of a role than literally she goes through in the plot. And that's one where when you have a character that clearly has an emotional tie for our protagonist, then you get invested in them too. And it wasn't about the mother, but that's just one thing that if the movie's going to leave me hanging as I felt it did at the end, that's one that definitely I go forwards and I'm like, the prospect of the future is so unknown. There's no way that I can sit back and go, all right, we're good now.
You guys want to touch on anything else? I mean, we're kind of nearing the end of the hour.
I think director Cuaron must really love dogs because there were a lot of really cute dogs. And every single time there was a dog on screen, I wanted to reach through the screen and pet them. They were so adorable.
And the ones hanging up on the wall.
Way to make things grim.
Wow.
All right.
Oh my gosh.
All right, we're gonna give our final thoughts on Roma. Like I said, the Netflix film that won Best Foreign Language Film. You know what, Jack, you're the guest of honor. You want to go first?
What do we do? Numbers or letters?
It was letter grade.
Letters. Okay, I'll put it on I'll give it a low A-.
It's a pretty good scale. I was really happy with it. I've been teetering between like A and A+, but I don't know what makes it a perfect film. And what makes a film perfect, honestly? Like, there's so many categories and there's so many things.
To me, there is no such thing as a perfect film.
Yeah.
It's art.
You just get close to being a damn near a perfect film.
Yeah, and the thing is, I felt this emotional connection to it. So honestly, because of that and
that's totally fine.
What
man.
I felt, I'd probably give it an A+.
That's totally fine,
Yeah.
Man. With me and Whiplash, like one of my friends I went to go see it with, I was in band when I was in high school, so I had a much more emotional connection to that movie. Yeah. And like if we had this show when that movie came out, I would have given it an A+ for the same reason.
God, Whiplash is great.
Well, for me, my personal metric in regards to perfection is that it's purely personal. It's whatever panders to your interests the most for me. This isn't quite there for me, although I do think it is a technically amazing film. Honestly, I try to think, when I give movies ratings, I try to think about what I can get from this that I can't get from other films, or at least what here is done especially well. And sometimes it's only going to be one element, and that's fine. For me, the use of foreshadowing, both through dialogue and visually, was just so gratifying by the end. Like the minute I realized how the very last scene of the film, as well, and the first moments, the literally opening scene, how they were connected and how it was like, it ended as it began. As the minute that I made that connection in my mind, I was like, oh, this is magnificent. I'd give this film a solid A. I do think that the pacing at times could. I don't think. This isn't the type of movie I typically watch. That's the only thing.
Like I said, these are hard for me to review as well because I don't typically see these many films.
Yeah, because I'd be worried.
To say how these things that we think are amazing. I don't know what like the standard is normally, especially whether it's a foreign film or whether it's more of like a quote unquote Oscar film. So like you look at it as a movie and see what. And
I don't know how long I would have stayed with it if I was not watching it for this show. I'm glad I did though. That's all I can say. I'd give this film a solid A.
All right, for me, before I give my grade, I just wanted to share this one quick trivia fact I found on IMDb's page. Alfonso Cuaron was the only person on the set to know the entire script and the direction of the film. So each day before filming a scene, he would give his lines to his cast in an attempt to basically like show real emotion and shock from characters the day they were shooting that scene.
That's
I think that's pretty cool. That reminds me of Ridley Scott when
Yeah.
like he didn't tell them like the alien was gonna burst out.
I
The chest
was
of
literally
the
just
alien.
about to mention
Yeah,
that.
he told them like, no, you guys will leave and you'll come back and then his stomach will be open. It's like I love when directors do that kind of thing because sometimes you lead to really good, acting like this, like they did with Alien. But for me, I'm kind of in the same boat with Jack. I did have a few problems about the ending, especially with some of the characters where the end. But and then the pacing, I will say, like it can like definitely turn somebody off. But
the beginning for sure. Yeah.
If you can make it past that first 20 minutes, I think you'll be in for a treat.
Yeah.
I mean, this is probably the best thing I've seen on Netflix without a doubt. I was juggling between A-, A. I'm gonna go with an A. It could very well back down to an A- the longer I think about it. But right now, I mean, after like seeing it and whatnot,